Greetings in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to go over some scriptures with you today. Some scriptures that are very important to me. They've helped me to maintain a decent walk towards the Lord at this point in my life. We'll start in John chapter 6. I'm going to be quoting Jesus right now out of the book of John. John chapter 6, Jesus was speaking to those around him, and he said that unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, that you have no part of me. What he was saying is basically that I got to become like your very life source, like your food and your water. And those around him, or many of his disciples around him, said this is a very hard saying. And it says that in verse 66 that many of them no longer followed him after that. It says many of his disciples no longer followed him after that. John chapter 8 verse 31 says, if you continue in my word, then you are truly my disciples indeed. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John chapter 8:31 says, if you are my disciples, you will be continuing in my word. Well, in the last episode in John chapter 6, these disciples didn't want to continue in his word. It was too hard for them. John chapter 8 verse 42, he says, if God were your father, you would love me. If you don't love Jesus, God's not your father. Evidence of us loving Jesus. John chapter 14 verse 15, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you're not keeping God's commandments, you don't love Jesus. If you don't love Jesus, God ain't your father. We can just follow the train back here of the statements that Jesus is saying, and we can come to a conclusion here. In John chapter 15, Jesus says he is the vine and that we were the branches. It says that every branch that is in the vine that bears not fruit has to be cut off and thrown into the fire. Mind you, this is a branch that's connected to the vine. Okay? So, it's very, we are capable to have a belief in Jesus, hang around the church, hang around Christian people, have Christian slogans and statements that come out of our mouths, but if we're not bearing fruit, that is, if we're not keeping God's commandments, you're going to get cut off and thrown into the fire. Now, I'm not coming up with things that are my opinion. This is stuff that Jesus said. All right? John chapter 14 verse 24 says, he that loves me not keeps not my sayings. All right? Jesus says, if you love me, you keep my commandments. If you don't love me, you're not going to keep my sayings. Are you doing what Jesus said to do? If you're not striving with all you got to do what Jesus said to do, you're not making the mark right now. Am I saying that you're going to hell? That's not for me to say. But in my own life, I had to start wondering, are you going to hell? Are you doing what God said to do? Because the scriptures say if I'm not doing what he says to do, I'm not really a follower of his. So this message is to point out some of Jesus' sayings to you and help you to examine your own life to see if you truly are in the faith.